It's wonderful to be with you. I think this is a very topical subject. We've got the new possible era in venture capital. We've got a wonderful panel, some of these issues, and I thought we could just spend a few minutes on the general picture at the moment, and then positive about the future for venture capital within the next year, 18 months or so. I know you think differently, or there's certainly some. Could you comment on perhaps that?
Built anywhere in the world for minimal upfront cost with the ability to reach vast audiences.
I've been with the Chimera for the last 6 years, which will come with Petroleum, and we've been investing actively in all asset classes, including venture capital, across the world through funds and directly through companies. So yeah, we have seen the massive increase in valuations over the last few years.
Whether that's taking a really active position or being more of a passive bystander, or we can decide to incubate something in-house if we think there's.
And it's not going away. And the importance of it is will be emphasized even more. So looking for us, we apply the same principle, real solutions to real problems, doing things in a different way to solve pain points and that are sustainable.
From that particular situation.
Look, I think
Then it sure as hell is in VC, right? I think there's some stat that like in the 90s, the top decile of Silicon Valley funds shared one thing, and it was like that they were in Google up to pre-IPO round. That was it. And then in the 2000s, it was the exact same thing for Facebook. And maybe you could say there's some mediating variables, like you got in those because you made other bets that were viewed well by the market, or your peers rate you highly. But the point is, it really boils down to a few winners, and that doesn't feel like much of a craft, right? I think that's exactly right. It's not really magic to value, at least maybe not earliest stage, but there are public comps.
Governments and countries really get behind that base layer, this 3-4% R&D of GDP, which I keep talking about. You see amazing.
I do look at emerging markets, and we got direct investment in India, for example, but I'm very cognizant of
the things that your investors are looking at, not just the initial phase, but how you manage to mentor companies during the process.
Yeah, so we published a report recently that was on VC funding trends in Europe, VC crypto funding. And one thing we found was Europe has the largest amount of VC-backed crypto startups. It lags in scaled companies. So, on the one hand, that could be what Edward said, which is just there might be something endemic here, right? That it's just consistently harder for a company that starts here to scale or to reach unicorn status. Or it could just be that they're earlier, right? That this funding has picked up in the last couple of years, that the kind of companies that put, for crypto, unicorns on the map in the US, they were largely exchanges, like big centralized companies that needed things like bank connections and big marketing budgets, and that the next trading in that kind of environment, especially if they're going to launch a token. So we see them moving here, and we see them starting companies here.
Thank you. Edward, I'd like to ask.
And unlike what I said earlier, people do react to the short term. So I've seen allocations to VC cut, and I've seen allocations within VC, as I mentioned, move from the growth to the early stage.
So, and if I don't get too complicated with this in the world of like NFTs and global networks and societies, and I just say, hey, there's something down the street, I'm going to be one of its first customers. Yeah, there's one thing that's like kind of receivable financing. Maybe that's one way in the past. In age of old, I might have taken a bet on something. I say, if I'm going to come in early, let me pay the same rate forever, but own a stake.
I think more and more people are realizing it's a myth that impact investing has to come at the expense of returns. Because if it does, then it's not sustainable, therefore it's not really going to help you going forward. We look at that, and we've done a few investments in that space. It's all part of the analysis. I mean, for example, we've invested in a wide range of things.
These are often founders that they're setting up like a foundation or an entity. They're figuring out how they're going to launch their protocol, how they're going to interact with developers globally, token holders. This is kind of a fact of crypto, that they have this weird, large web of stakeholders. So as they're setting that up, they're in the US, and they are thinking,